Hi sunflowers. So I thought I'd go out with a bang for this month and talk about shadow work, because I know that's something that a lot of people urge me to speak on, and I don't think I've spoken on it enough yet on the channel, but it is going to be a part of my future. The changes that are coming with my channel and my website and everything else are going to usher in the age of shadow for me in my creative life and my professional life. So I can feel it coming on the horizon. I'm really excited about it, and I think that I'm going to move more towards talking about it in greater depth and offering courses on it and that kind of thing. So I'm going to start as I mean to go on. I'm going to talk a little bit about some aspects of shadow work today, some of which I've covered, some of which I haven't covered. I received a Facebook comment the other day that was from somebody who wanted me to speak on what you can expect when you do shadow work. What are the things that you need to look out for, what are the difficult parts that you might need to overcome or check in with yourself with regard to when they happen. You kind of need to know about it or they're kind of going to blindside you, and just talking a little bit more about the shadow work process really. And it was weird because I thought to myself, that's odd, because I've actually made notes for just such a video. I can't remember the comment exactly now, I don't have it with me, but it was something to do with talking about what you can expect when you do shadow work, what might come up kind of thing. And I was thinking, I already have notes for that, so if that's something that people want to know about, then that's something that I can definitely do. But one thing I want to stress about the nature of this video is that I am just going to let myself go. I'm just going to ramble and I'm just going to see where it goes. I don't want to keep it too regimented to the notes that I made, and indeed some of the notes that I made might not even be relevant kind of now in terms of what I'm thinking now. I don't know, things change. So I'm just going to let myself ramble and see where it goes. If you are new to my channel and you're not really sure what shadow work is, or you know what shadow work is, but you have only learned about it from somebody else's perspective and you kind of want to check in with what I think of it and how I approach it, then I have a playlist now called Shadow Work, which exists by popular demand. So if you go over there, you can have a little look at some of the things that I've said about shadow work, tips to get started with shadow work and so on. So that might be kind of a more appropriate place for you to start. Today I want to start by talking about something that is not part of the notes that I made, but something that's only just kind of come into my mind in recent days. And that is the fact that a lot of people think that they need to start their shadow work with childhood. Now, this is not something that I've ever personally posited, but it is something that seems like it might be sensible and seems like it might make sense. So it doesn't really surprise me that a lot of people have kind of taken their childhood to be the natural starting point in shadow work, the organic starting point in shadow work. That isn't the case. You don't have to do everything in a linear fashion with shadow work. You don't have to do David Copperfield, I was born, I grew up, that kind of thing. Anybody spot the Interview with the Vampire reference there? Goth at heart, always a goth at heart. Back to the topic at hand. You don't need to start with your childhood. Some people will want to start there. For some people that will make sense. But there are other places that you can begin. You can begin with a repetitive negative cycle that you have spotted that keeps coming up in your life, either in relation to the connections you have in your life and the way that you conduct yourself within the fabric of those human connections, or with regard to a specific area of your life. Maybe it's something that you just keep doing in your career. Maybe you keep getting stuck in unsatisfactory jobs with very kind of similar issues in each of them, and you need to kind of dive deeper and have a look at that. Maybe there are bad habits that you can't stop. Maybe you have an addictive cycle that you really struggle to stop, or maybe you have a particular behaviour that is really kind of screwing you over time after time and you need to look it square in the face. So you start with something that you're feeling resentful about, start with something that you're feeling angry or upset over, and just kind of get it in your mind, sit with it, and then ask yourself, why does it upset you so much? Why is it so upsetting to you? And then answer that question. And then when you've answered that question, you ask again, why is that so upsetting to you? Why is that so jarring to you? And that's how you start to get down to the root. For some people it is really that simple, and it doesn't need to begin with childhood. But like I always say with shadow work, and this is something I will always posit to you, everything is connected. All parts of the psyche and all parts of the shadow have their connections. It's like that 6 degrees of separation thing, where you will find that one thing does lead to another and one pathway does lead to another. One thread is connected to another in the web of your psyche, and your shadow is a part of your psyche. It's the unaccessed part of your psyche. So obviously some roads may lead to childhood. You may find yourself thinking about how something is connected to something in childhood, and that's where it gets juicy. That's where the shadow work starts to get really productive, is when you start to see the links between things and the connections between things. If you realise that something, for example, in somebody's behaviour in your place of work is pissing you off, and then you realise that that person's behaviour reminds you of your domineering mother, or reminds you of something that you went through with a difficult sibling, that's where you start to find the roots and the stems. And not all roads do lead to childhood, and I want to stress that. You know, a lot of stuff ends up in shadow because of events that happened in your adult life, situations that unfolded in your adult life. So you might not naturally find your way back in childhood territory, but my point is that it doesn't really matter where you start. Quite often I like to say to people that the shadow is a little bit like a massive tangled ball of yarn that you need to sort out, and you need to kind of get in a straight line somehow so that you can have a conscious understanding of it. And so really it's just about picking a point in that yarn. And for a lot of people it will be obvious that they need to begin in childhood, but for a lot of other people it's just a great big ball of yarn. Just pick a thread, you know, pick a thread and start pulling at it and manipulating it and seeing what happens. And I guarantee you that in the end all of that yarn will be straightened out, and it won't really matter where you started ultimately. If you want to have a look at your childhood and you want to kind of take your childhood through the filter of shadow work, then you could start by, if you don't have any strong memories, or you don't kind of have any really strong awareness of what the family dynamic was like when you were a small child or anything like that, or even what you were like as a child, then I would start by just thinking about what the concept of childhood means to you. What kinds of thoughts and feelings and associations does it bring up inside of you? That would be a really good place to start. Another good place to start would be to actually sit down in deep contemplation or meditation and open yourself up to memories of how you felt as a child. You know, because deep within you there are collections, clusters of feelings, emotions that are connected very strongly to the way you felt in childhood, because they are representative of your inner child, the part of you which is still a child now in your adult life. You know, I really think that is also a really good place to start. I personally don't have many strong memories that are very clear cut and that I know were definitely my memories. I do struggle a lot with something called confabulation, which is where you wonder whether or not you're actually kind of mishmashing your memories together from collections of photographs that you've seen or things that you've been told by others. But yeah, I struggle with that. I actually think that quite a few of my memories are not really my memories, but are actually just photographs that I've seen. And I've kind of dumped myself into the photograph. I'm quite practiced at astral travel, so that could be one reason why I do that, or why I've been able to do that. Or it could be a mishmash of the two things, that in the one sense I'm quite practiced at putting myself in the astral realm and looking at details and actually projecting myself there, and also I'm probably having some kind of fuzzy, hazy memory of the place in the photo, but it's not a full memory. You know, it's not a 100% accurate memory from my mind. It's a combination of things. So, you know, I have a lot of that, and I have a lot of people have told me stories over the years. My parents, my family members have told me stories, and I think that I have actually taken those stories and put them into part of my kind of stock memory photo pile thingy. So for me, I work more on emotions, the emotions that my inner child feels, the emotions that I felt as a child, the things that I went through in my emotional life on the inner terrain. And I have memories of things that I like to do, you know, I don't have any specific memories necessarily of events, but I have memories of times that I spent whiling away the hours reading or drawing or doing trance work. So for me, you know, I have those things to draw on, so I have a good understanding of what makes my inner child happy. And, you know, I definitely have some memories that I can go back to for that. But what I want to stress to you is that you don't need this really big mammoth, clear-cut collection of stupendously well-remembered, you know, recollections of childhood in order to work with your childhood, nor do you need to begin with your childhood to do decent shadow work. I would think about what drew you to do shadow work in the first place. For a lot of people, their attraction to shadow work has nothing to do really with something that happened in childhood, and it's not to do with something unresolved with regard to being a child. It's more to do with a pattern that they have noticed in adulthood that comes up in other kinds of non-familial relationships or in other aspects of life which are not directly to do with the family. So I would say if you have been attracted to shadow work for something like that, or for something to do with your spiritual practice, anything of that nature, then it's fine to start there. You don't need to go back to you know, what were the energies in my family when I was born, and what was it like for me as a child? If that doesn't feel like the organic starting point for you, then don't start there, you know, and don't try and force memories to come. I would definitely suggest that once you get into that big ball of yarn, things will start to come naturally. Your synapses will start to reconnect where there were not connections there before, and you will start to get memories or understandings that you thought were long lost to the annals of time that are now suddenly a part of your conscious mind again. So that's the excitement with shadow work, I would say. Another thing I want to say that I kind of want to confirm or reaffirm with you guys here on the channel is that people who talk about shadow work, teach shadow work, and have an interest in shadow work and an interest in positing that information to others have very different approaches to the tool, and they have very different ways of addressing it and using it and facilitating it in their lives and teaching other people about it. Everyone comes at it from their own standpoint. And I want to kind of be clear about where I'm coming from with it. I'm a student of Jung. That's how I see myself. So I have a lot of time and a lot of respect for Jungian analysts, Jungian authors, and spiritual teachers who utilise Jungian principles in their work. Those people have been instrumental in my own learning. They have made things easier for me. They have kind of made things more accessible to me as somebody who is not kind of in the traditional sense an academic. So it's definitely been useful to have those people, to have people who like venerate Jung's principles but kind of translate them into an easily digestible modern kind of way. That's been cool, and I would never reject any of that stuff, and I would never say that that stuff isn't important. But I am a student of Jung, and I see those analysts and those authors who have used Jung's principles and written books about those principles to also be students of Jung. They are students of Jung themselves. And so I think it's personally really important to keep hold of that fact and to know that Jung is the strong foundation. Now, Carl Gustav Jung did not give us a lot of hard and fast principles and a lot of written detail about shadow work, not as much as we would like as students, right? Not as much as we could definitely like get our minds around as students. But, you know, he was clear on the principles, and he did give us some stuff to go on. And I believe that that stuff that he gave us is very important and should never be avoided or rejected. You know, I think it's important to build on principles that people have left behind, but I don't think it's important to jump beyond what it is that they themselves said about those principles. Now, for me, Jung is the inventor. Jung, when it comes to shadow work, is the prime mover. And Jung said there is no coming to consciousness without pain. And let me just say that again so that you can sit with it and so that you can kind of steep in it for a moment. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. And for me, that is nowhere more true than when addressing shadow work, the integration process, and these ideas that he gave to us about unearthing, digging up that dark, rich soil from the forgotten parts of the psyche. It's hard, it's painful, it hurts. Does that mean it's bad? No. Does that mean it should be avoided? No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. For me, it means that there may be a correct or not so correct time to embark on it, for sure. Like any challenge you go through in life, you know, like you can be ready for a marathon or not so ready for a marathon. You can be ready to plunge yourself into a creative project, or maybe not so ready to do that, depending on what else is going on in your life, depending on what other challenges you're dealing with, depending on your physical fitness, blah, blah, blah. You know, these are things that one needs to prepare for, and that is taken as given. Nobody questions that you need to prepare to do certain things in life. Nobody questions that you need to feel like you're up to the mark in order to begin. So for me, I don't think there's any point in questioning whether or not one needs to actually look at their preparedness for shadow work. One needs to kind of look at what else is going on in their life and appreciate that now may be the time, or not quite so much the time, to embark on what I would consider, what I would say is a committed period of shadow work. So for me, that's just how I roll with it. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. And, you know, for me personally, with my shadow work, with the journey that I have had with shadow work and continue to have with shadow work, if there is no pain, if there is no breakdown to break through, if there is no sense of me having had to lose something in order to gain that deeper wisdom, then I think I'm doing it wrong, and I would question that. If I'm too comfy, then I question that. And that for me is how my shadow work has gone. And so that is the perspective that I come from with it, and that is how I teach it, and that is how I talk about it. That might not resonate with everybody, and I think that's absolutely fine. I don't think there is one right answer, but I am, you know, in some ways a purist, a traditionalist. I'm a Jungian. I make no apology for that. I mean, Robert A. Johnson, Debbie Ford, all these people, come on down, give me what you got. Like, I love you, but we're all learning from the prime mover, the inventor, the teacher. We're all learning from Jung. So Jung is the Mac Daddy for me, and that's who I come back to. He is who I come back to. And if he says there's no coming to consciousness without pain, then I'll fucking take that. You might find that you come across something in shadow work that you thought you'd put to bed. You might find that you worked very hard to figure something out and to release it, and you might wonder, why the hell is it coming up in my shadow work now? You know, I'm done with it. And what I would ask you to think to yourself is, are you learning a lesson from a new place? From the new place is kind of how I like to say it. And what that means is, sometimes you shed a skin, you evolve, you go through a metamorphosis in life, and then suddenly, just when you are, you know, enjoying your butterfly wings and kind of having a jaunt around the garden, something old and dusty and done with kind of smacks you out of the air, and it is because you're learning a lesson from the new place. When you evolve and you shed a skin and you kind of develop a deeper reserve of knowledge about yourself and about the way that you are in the world, sometimes you need to approach a lesson that you've already learned with that new sense of perspective, with that deeper understanding of self, so that you can learn the lesson on perhaps an even deeper and more nuanced and more beneficial level. So don't discount that. Definitely don't be annoyed with yourself about that, you know, don't berate yourself for it. I made a video quite some time ago about dealing with a recurring negative cycle. I'm going to stick that in the doobly-doo below, so if this is a particular part of the video that resonates with you, please pop over there and watch that video as well. And in that video I talk about negative cycles that recur, why they might recur, and what to do about that, how to deal with it. You will definitely find that stubbornness will come out, and unwillingness to accept something will come out, and this is where you basically need to do a little bit of experimentation, and you need to play with what you've learned. If something comes up in shadow work that makes you realise that you are being a certain way, or that your perspective on something is skewed, or that your expectation of somebody is unrealistic, whatever it is that you don't want to accept, I would recommend sitting with it, writing it down, writing about the fact that you don't want to accept it about yourself, and then test your stubbornness, test your unwillingness to believe it about yourself by putting yourself in some situations where that aspect of you might come out, and kind of, you know, test it, see what happens. Have a look at your memories as well. Take a look through your memory bank at times where that stuff has come into play, and kind of bombard yourself with evidence and see if that changes the situation. Shadow work is about challenging yourself. It's not about sitting pretty, comfortable with your idea of who you are and how everything is. You know, you come to shadow work because you kind of know in a way that that is somewhat of a delusion, that your ego has allowed you to feed yourself a nice little story about who you are. And you come to shadow work because you want to smash the shit out of that story. You want to shred that story to pieces. And so do that, you know, allow yourself to push through the resistance and really do that. Go with it, test it out. When you do shadow work and when you look at your human connections, your human relationships with people, you will start to realise that people are not their roles. You know, we ask people to play roles in our lives. We resent parents particularly for the fact that they weren't the mother that they should have been, the father that they should have been. You know, they didn't fulfil the role. You know, we are very poisoned with our human consciousness and, you know, with the way that we deal with things as human beings. We are poisoned with roles. There's all the roles and not enough soul. Everybody should be fitting into a box, you know. And when we realise that somebody is infinitely more complex than that box that we wish they would have just gotten into so that we could be happy, so that we could trust them, then we realise that all of this stuff, the flimsy surface veneer that we live our lives according to, starts to break down, starts to dismantle. And when you do shadow work, you have a look at the roles that you are expected to play, the roles that your parents expected you to play, the roles that your partner expects you to play, the roles that past partners expected you to play, the roles that you are playing in your friendship groups or at work that you have long outgrown or that are not satisfying to you. And so not only do you have to question the roles that you expect other people to play, but you have to start connecting with yourself and having a look at the disguises, the costumes that you're putting on in your daily life that really just don't fit you, that are ill-fitting, that make you feel weird, that, you know, they don't serve you. And this is where compartmentalization comes in. This is a big thing that a lot of people discover during their shadow work. They start to realise that they are one version of themselves at home, and they're another version of themselves at work, and they're a certain version of themselves with this friend, and they're a certain version of themselves with this friend. They may be a version of themselves with both parents, and then they might be a different version of themselves with only one parent present. And obviously the persona is fluid, okay? And we actually amplify and underline different parts of our characters depending on who we're around, and depending what works for us, and depending what comes out of us in the moment. And that is natural. Compartmentalization occurs when it is an extremely overwrought process which exhausts you and which you feel obliged to do for the sake of other people and for the sake of your own ego. Compartmentalization is where it's no longer about the fluid movement of the persona in relation to your circumstances and the people around you. It's not about that anymore. It's not as organic as that. Compartmentalization is where it's gone over the line. It's where you feel compelled to be a specific person and to really hold this rigid identity in one place and then switch to another very rigid, very inflexible identity in another place or in another situation. And it's about your feeling that something bad is going to happen if you don't do that, that you will be disapproved of or not accepted if you don't do that. So again, this is about breaking down roles, you know, and shadow work is a lot to do with that. If you're considering going on a shadow work journey, know now that some of the roles you've been playing will be broken down, and you will also recognise the standard that you hold other people to and where that might be unrealistic or unfair, and you will start to break those things down too. I would recommend, if you're watching this video and you're feeling inspired and you're feeling like, I want to do some shadow work, I want to break some shit down and look at it, and I want to put all the ugly stuff out into the light and look at it, then I would maybe think about doing some work over the coming days or weeks with regard to roles, and how you can start to flip the script so that you see people more as the nuanced, complex, many-selved selves that they are, you know, like start to see them in the full light. Don't just start to think about who you want them to be or who you think they should be. And have a look at why you think they should be whatever you think they should be. Like, why is that? Where does that expectation come from? What is the stem of that expectation? And take that stem right down to the root and start to question that and just bring it out into the light. Remember, shadow work is not about trying to manipulate the clay in another way. It's about seeing the whole thing. Because it's only when you see your beliefs, when you see your fears, when you see these things about yourself, when you're conscious of them, then they stop dominating, then they stop having control over you. Let me tell you in a really kind of shorthand way what the shadow is. Have you ever heard somebody say, or have you ever said yourself something along the lines of, I don't know where that came from. That was so not me. That's just not who I am. I don't know why I said that. I don't know why I did that. I don't know where that came from. You know, that's a really classic one. I just wasn't myself that day. I wasn't being myself that day. Normally what we're talking about when we reference those kinds of situations where we felt like we had an out-of-body experience and we really behaved out of alignment with our core character, and we feel embarrassed about it or we feel angry with ourselves about it, that's shadow coming out. And the reason that we feel like we're having this out-of-body experience or like we've become somebody else when we look at that stuff is because we didn't have control over it. We don't look at it normally. We don't accept it normally. So when it slips out into our conscious life, into our words, our actions, our thoughts, the way we are with people, it's unpleasant and it's a little scary because we're not conscious of it all the time. We work very hard not to be conscious of it all the time. So when it comes out, it feels like, where did that come from? What the fuck? Why would I say that? And it comes out in things like off-colour jokes that you make that you quickly regret, stuff that comes out that shows really how you judge people on this deeper level that you don't normally think about. Just being needlessly cruel to your children or your friends, you know, trying to knock them down a peg or two instead of trying to build them up. And you think, God, why would I treat him or her that way? That's not what I wanted to do at all. And basically shadow work is having the balls, having the gumption, having the dance, having the moxie inside to pull that stuff out and look at it instead of going, that wasn't me, that didn't happen, don't want to look at that, build up the wall, brick it up, get the bloody concrete over it. Yep, not looking at that. Shadow work is about saying, get me that sledgehammer. I'm going to see what's behind that wall. I want to know, because whatever's behind that wall is taking control, and I don't want it to have control anymore. I want to see it. I want to embrace it. I want to know it as myself. I want to know all about it. I want to sit down and take tea with whatever is behind that fucking wall. And it's only after that that my life will come back into my own hands, and that is shadow work. That's the belief. I'm sorry for all the analogies, but you know me, I am the analogy queen. I can't help myself. So hopefully that kind of explains to you what shadow work is, what it's for, you know. You'll see your projections when you do shadow work. You'll see the things that you judge others as that you really are yourself, you know. It's much easier to see your issues in another person and see them as other to you and attack them in that other person, judge them in that other person, or analyse them in that other person, because it keeps you 1 degree removed from the reality, which is the seed, the point at which that characteristic exists within yourself. So projections are a big one, you know, and maybe in the future, as I said, when my channel becomes more geared towards this stuff, I will do a separate video on projections, and just, you know, maybe I'll just think about doing more specific videos if that is something that would help people. You'll definitely see where you are on the bullshit carousel when you do shadow work, that BS carousel that I love to talk about, and I'll be talking about it more during Self-Love September. You can bet your bottom dollar on that. You will see where you are using your childhood trauma, the difficulties that you've been through, the setbacks that you've had, the things that your parents didn't provide for you, the things other people have that you don't have, for example, inherited wealth or stunning good looks or an international lifestyle or whatever. You will see how you use those things to keep yourself trapped in your crappy little story. You will see how you kind of foster excuses and you harvest your excuses. You get your excuses all lined up in a row so that you don't have to take risks, so that you don't have to make bold moves in your own life. When you use the things that have happened to you to keep yourself stuck, that's a big one in shadow work, and that is a big place that it can bring you to. And you know what? There's a big feeling of wasted time when you reach that point, when you see that you've been using that as an excuse, you've been using something as an excuse to remain stagnant, to keep yourself stuck in this crappy little story. There are tears sometimes when that realization comes through, but you've got to break down to break through sometimes. That's what I believe, and tears are a gateway. Tears are the gateway to illumination. I believe it, and I want you to believe it too. You know, tears are not bad, they're good, they cleanse. They're the point from which you can begin again. When my face is puffy and red and I've sat with a realization and I have wept it out of me and it feels fucking raw and my throat hurts, then I know that the debris is cleared and the strong foundation is laid. And I might need to have a nap before I start building, because it's exhausting having those moments of raw realization. It's exhausting, but god damn, after that's done, I know I'm ready. And that is the magic, isn't it? That's why we do shadow work, I think. Not every moment in shadow work is this massive realization or this huge overwhelming thing. You know, you got to go through the motions, and I'm developing a method that I'm going to kind of establish a course around that kind of helps. It will help people to go through the motions and to do that more daily grind stuff with regard to shadow work, because it's not all these overwhelming, what I like to call these kitchen floor moments, you know, where it's like, I've just realised and now I can, you know, it's not all that at all, believe me. It's a lot of admin, actually. It's a lot of writing things down. It's a lot of post-it notes for me. It's a lot of, I've noticed this pattern again here, and so it's linked to this. It's a little bit like when you see these prison, like not prison dramas, like police dramas, you know, where they've got the board up, you know, and you've got like the constables and the detectives with all of the images of different people and different locations, and they've got the thread, and the thread connects everything together in these weird, twisty, wiry, spidery, blah. That's really mostly what shadow work is. It's about looking at the map and being like, okay, so I do that here as well. And that also makes me think of dad. So that is also coming from childhood. So I need to connect these things. And then if I look at these 3 relationships, I see that in all 3 of these relationships, this kind of toxic archetype was present. And so I need to kind of, it's like that. It's a lot of admin, okay? It's not all like the glorious spiritual moment of actually getting to the point. But you need that admin to get to the point. So don't discredit that admin. Don't discredit the journaling, you know, the making notes about it. I mean, I would even recommend a ring binder for shadow work sometimes rather than a bound book, because you're gonna wanna get stuff out on the floor and start, you know, putting things together. I'd recommend tarot too, you know, check the shadow work playlist for the tarot spreads that I've shown you for shadow work. I will certainly do more of them. I have 1,000,001 in my head, so I have no problem sharing. So I will definitely do some more shadow work spreads at another point and help people to use tarot and oracle decks more for definite, because that I definitely think is helpful and I would recommend that. My camera says that I only have 11 minutes left, so I am either going to do a part 2 or save some stuff until after Self-Love September, or maybe film at another time and put the 2 videos together. I don't know, maybe I'll save some. So yeah, just to keep you on your toes, just to keep you shadow workers interested. I will definitely do more. I will do more, I will give more, I will help as much as I can, because I believe in the material. You know, I believe in it. And so I guess that's all for now. So happy shadow working campers, and so much love until next time. Blessed be.